Good evening, everyone. This is Shivam Roy from Hacksux, and welcome to another video. So, in this video, we are going to look into how Python programming is carried out. So, as I explained to you in the previous video, that this is how we import modules in Python, saying using the import keyword. Then after this, whatever we write here is pretty much the main, and here we have an if statement which is used by indent, and Python uses indent to figure out which is under which particular construct. And then we know that we can assign variables without any typecasting in Python, and then print it with the help of its member functions if it is an instance, as this is. So this is as much we have learned, but now we are going to look into something more than this. So one thing I've planned for this tutorial series is that I would keep on writing code which is important for some particular purpose, and you would understand how it is actually carried out, how the programming is actually carried out by looking at that code itself. So let's say I gedit or use gedit to open a file. Let's say web check .py. Okay, so when you open this Python file for the first time here in Ubuntu or in Kali or in a Linux distribution, the first thing we have to do is give a shebang, that is this, and then give the name of the Python compiler. Now how would I figure that out? To find that out, I would have to type where is Python, and you see user bin Python. So here I will write usr min python. So user bin Python. So this is how this particular program is gonna start, and after this we can import the modules and do pretty much what we were doing in the previous video. So let's say import sys, and the next import which I'm gonna do with a comma is called HTTPlib. Now what is HTTPlib? So what we are trying to do in this program is we are gonna make a program which connects to a host and a port in the internet, and then tells us if we can connect to it or not, right? If that port is open or not. Now to do that, I will have to import a module known as HTTPlib. Now what is HTTPlib? To know that, we will have to Google. So here HTTP module, the HTTP protocol client. So this module is basically, this httplib.py basically is a HTTP protocol client which is used to connect to a web server on port 80. And how am I gonna do that? Using HTTPlib HTTP connection, I am gonna send a host name and a port. So this is the host name and this is the port. So this is how I am gonna connect to it. Now I can set a timeout or not, or even not set a port. These are all optional, but of course I'll have to give a host name to connect to, and then I have to use this structure to, I have to use HTTPlib is the program which I'm importing, that is the module, and the HTTP connection is a member function of that, where I have to pass the host parameter to it, right? So let us do that. Now before doing that, I would like to do one thing, and I would like to tell you about Python functions. So we define function saying def, right? So let's say def connect is the name of my function, which I'll use a host and a port. So after this, everything I write here is inside this particular def connect function. So under the connect function, I'll write, let's say client, that is our variable, equal to httplib dot http connection, and after that I give a host and a port, right? So here I give a host and a port, and I'm gonna connect to this host and port. After that, this, what will this return? This will return a object of this connection, right? This HTTP connection instance ka ek object. So how would I know what it's returning? To be sure, I would use a Python interpreter here, and I would type import httplib. After that, let's say c equal to httplib dot http connection, and let's say I make this connection to my own computer. So this will be a string of host name which I'll give 127.0.0.1 that means pretty much my host machine, and an integer which carries the port value. So once I've done that and I press C, I see that this is an HTTPlib.connection instance which is instantiated at this location. So this returns a location, an object of this returns an object, right, an object of this particular class or module. So after this, what I have to do is I have to figure out the member in functions, like, you know, HTTP connection instance has the following methods. So these are all the member functions. These are this dot request, get response, these are all the member functions of this particular instance which I have created using this code, right? So now that I have an variable which is an instance of HTTP connection class or function, I am going to use that to figure out the member functions inside that, and using those member functions I am going to handle this HTTP connection object, right? So the next line which I am going to write here is, let's say I want to send a request which is a get request to the server, right? So let's say client dot request, just the way it was given in the guide, get comma. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that I am using this instance of HTTP connection, and then I am using the request which is the member function of this object, and then sending the get, that is this is the method which I am using to retrieve, which can be get, post, or any other method. So I am using get here, and I am trying to retrieve the root page of the particular host which I'll send, right? So after that I would do a client dot get response as was given in the documentation. I would do this to get the response, and then I would simply close the connection saying client dot close, right? So that's all that we have to do with our object which we have with our function which we have defined, that is the connect function. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the host equal to the as the argument which I'll pass to this program, to let's say sys.argv1, which is the first argument which I'll pass, and then port equal to sys.argv2, and my program is gonna exit if the length of sys.argv is somewhere less than 3, or less than 3, and I'm gonna do a sys.exit saying less arguments, as we were doing in the previous video. So I guess this part is now clear to you, that you can understand why this is working this way. And after that, what I'm gonna do here is, after I get this connection, right, I also want to do something more than just that. I will use another if statement to check the response code. So if response dot status is somewhere equal to 200. Now what does this mean? This means that the response which I'll get from here, right, the client.get response. So let's say resp is equal to client.get response, that after using this get response function, I would get a response which I'll store in the response variable, and in that, from that variable, I am gonna see that if response status, the status of this response is 200. Why 200? Because in HTTP we use different codes to say that whether the particular resource is accessible or not. Like, let me give you an example. For instance, this is my browser. So I inspect the element and I go to network, right? When I reload this particular page, I would see that I am sending requests using get method, and the status returned is 200. That is okay, right? That means that the request is being served, or the resource I want is there. Now for instance, I give something like this. a resource that is not there in this particular website. When I do that, I would get a code status saying 404, that is code not found, right? So this is a different code, that is not 200 but 404, which means not found. So these are some self-defined codes, these are some defined codes which are standardized and used in HTTP protocol, and that is what we are trying to figure out using this particular coding exercise, sorry. So if we get an response code 200, I would know that I have been able to reach the server here. And if that's so, let's say print host plus okay. So this is gonna tell me that the particular server I'm trying to reach is okay, and then I'm gonna do a sys.exit, right? And here I'm gonna print host plus. Know that this plus I'm doing here is basically concatenating. It's gonna concat the value of this host parameter plus a string which is given inside these quotes, and I'm in the quotes I'm gonna say, let's say down, and after that let's give the response details. So let's say resp.status. This is again gonna give the integer response detail, and after that I'll again give a dot and then response dot reason. So this reason is also defined in HTTP protocol, and we just need to figure that out from the response which we are getting. Now notice that if the response is 200, I am printing OK and exiting, and this is outside the if statement. So this means that this particular code is only gonna be run when the response is not 200. So if I reach a web server and I get a 200 response from the web server, the program is gonna exit saying the host is okay. And if I don't, then this part of the code is gonna be skipped, and I'm gonna print that this host is down plus response status and response reason. Now there is another thing you would know is that this entire statement is being concatenated, right? So this is a string which is being concatenated with another string, which is being concatenated with an integer value, then with a string, then another string, and then another string. So here I would have to typecast this to a string. So let's say I have to say str and then put this inside brackets. So that would make this response the status value from an integer to a string, and thus I will be able to use it. After that, this is my main function, which is gonna tell me that if the number of arguments is less than 3, then I will say less arguments, and then if it's not, then I'll give sys.argv1, that is the first argument, as host, the second as port, and then from here I'm gonna call the method connect. So let's say connect host comma port. So from here I'm gonna connect the host comma port, that is, this is my main, which doesn't need to be explicitly defined in Python, but this is the code that is gonna run first. Now notice that I have called this function after I've defined it. That is because Python is interpreting this entire code. Now if I put this part of the code here under the function call, I would get an error saying connect is not defined, because before calling this particular function I need to define it before, because Python is going to read this code from top to bottom. So once that is done, I can simply save this, and let's say Python web check .py, right? Okay, so I have a syntax error. What is the error here is that after this I need to give a, so okay, everything else looks fine. Yep. So let's say less arguments. So since I have not supplied enough arguments, I get a less arguments error and the program exits. So let's say 127.0.0.1 on port 80. Now this is the arguments which I'm going to run this program with. Now how would I verify that this is working? For to verify this, I would use another Python cool trick which is really handy in the long run. So let's say Python -m, that is the module I want to use. I'll use this module simple HTTP server, which is gonna make a server on the argument I pass, that is server on port 80. So now this particular piece of code runs this Python HTTP server module on port 80, and thus I have an HTTP server running on my computer, that is on 127.0.1 on port 80. So if I press an enter key, I am supposed to get an OK response. So as you see, once I press an enter key, I get an OK response, and here from in my server I would see that there was a connection saying get, that is in get method, and it asks for my root directory or the root page, right? So this is the entire thing which I can see using this Python program. Now for you to better understand this concept, you could also do something like this. Like for instance, if I would want something like, let's say I want to get a page called index.html, so let's say index.html, right? And if I save here and then I again go here, I would see that file not found, or here at this time I tried to connect using index.html page, but this time since there is no index.html page in my server, I get a 404 not found or file not found exception. In the same way, if I try to connect to Google on port 80, I would know that Google will not let me connect because Google doesn't use HTTP but HTTPS. So if I try to connect to it, I would see a 301 response moved permanently. So basically our code is running, and all it needs to do is it needs to connect to a web server using this connect feature, and then it gives us the response the way we want to print it. So in this program, what you need to keep in mind is how importing a different module and then using a user defined function like def, saying def and then connect. I am passing the host and port parameters from my system arguments and directly calling connect from here, which is gonna run all this code and giving me the response. So I hope that tells you how the functions are defined in Python, how you can use the different new modules and learn the different usages, the different instances of how to instantiate a module like this, and then how to use the member functions of that module, which is given in obj, which is given here, which are all the following methods which are the member functions of these module, and we can use all of that to get the required functionality from our Python code. So that's all for this video. I hope you understood how this is done. In the next few videos, we are going to look into string manipulation in Python and further go into the depth of how you can use this. I hope you like this video, and please do recommend us to your friends and colleagues in the InfoSec community. Thank you.